we'll get into discussing the book, which is fantastic, by the way. I was able to blow through the advanced copy this week.
Oh, thank you. Amazing.
Thing?
Yeah, I blew through.
Yeah, I read the first chapter. I'm getting the audiobook so I can listen to it while I work.
Awesome.
It's like
awesome.
right in my wheelhouse. So it was really fascinating, really well.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Excited to discuss it with you.
It's very applicable to this podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah. Shockingly. Yeah. Shockingly relevant. Yeah. Exactly.
Awesome. Okay, Dale, you want to lead us
Hi,
in?
Internet. Does that like lead in like that or?
Wait. Yeah. But like wait. Okay.
I'm gonna put all this in anyway.
Yeah, I know you are.
Hi, Internet.
Hey, Internet. Welcome to episode 2.
Oh, man. One thing I forgot to look at, 239.
239 of Outrage Factory, the podcast where we look at the things that make people mad online and explain why they're dumb for caring. I'm your co-host, Derek Bolin.
I'm your other co-host, Dale DeRuiter. And this week, we're actually going to switch it up and do an interview with a guy who wrote a book because we're adults.
Books, which, as we all know, are the form of media that Dale never stops dunking on people for reading. Dale,
it's funny. Yeah. Tobias, one of the ongoing jokes we have on this podcast is I make fun of Derek for reading books. So I'm kind of got egg on my face for actually getting an author legitimately on the podcast to talk to. So
nice.
We are joined by Tobias Rose-Stockwell, the author of the forthcoming book Outrage Machine, which is, as we all know, listeners of this podcast will understand that is right in our wheelhouse, looking at how the internet has kind of evolved into this perpetual outrage factory, to crib the name of this podcast, and how they're leveraging people's anger to get more eyeballs, get more clicks, and how this isn't necessarily a new phenomenon. Tobias, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. There's, I think, few podcasts that focus so tightly on the issue at hand. So I'm excited to be here.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
You're definitely preaching to the choir. I would love to know, just starting off, like, what was your motivation for writing this book?
Yeah, so I've been tangling with this idea of outrage on the internet for a little bit longer than most people. I have a kind of a weird backstory insofar as I went viral when I was very young, before kind of social media existed, before the internet had really infiltrated most of our lives. Yeah, if you'll forgive a quick story here,
be as long-winded as you want.
Awesome, great. Yeah, when I was 23, I was traveling through Asia, and I met this monk while I was just backpacking through Asia, and I met this monk in Cambodia who was looking for help in rebuilding this reservoir, this irrigation system, and I got sucked into this project that I thought would maybe take 2 months of my life and $15,000. But basically, I got kind of jumped by this monk who had this project. And I wrote an email to friends and family, kind of asking for help. And this email went strangely viral because it was attached to a social network that some friends had designed. One of those friends went on to be one of the first engineers at Twitter. But this kind of process of going viral was a very strange thing, and that I had this kind of emotional plea to help this group of people in the middle of Cambodia. And this emotional plea actually was very contagious. And all of a sudden, I got this tremendous support for this project, which at the time felt like magic. It felt incredible, the ability to make something emotionally sticky, and then suddenly allow for kind of the compassion and interest and emotional support of many strangers to come in on the heels of that. So I was really enamored by this, and when I moved back to Silicon Valley in the early late 2000s, the social web was just really coming online. I had a lot of friends that were very early at these companies, and there was this real euphoria around social media being this magical tool to help us see each other better than ever before, right? There was this kind of idea of empathy. Empathy can change the world, and if we just increase the quantity of empathy available to everyone using tools like social media, we can actually make the world a better place.
So I just want to
So go ahead.
butt in, so I don't want to block up your flow or whatever, but I just want to go back to the building the dam in Cambodia, because I don't want you to just gloss over that, because it makes you like the best guy who's ever been on this podcast and the most virtuous. So I kind of just want to gleam on some of that, like live vicariously through your virtuousness. And like in the first chapter of the book, you cover how it went down and stuff, and it's actually pretty interesting how you kind of were not understanding what was going on, and then once you realized what was going on, you're like, okay, I'll be a good guy here and I'll do this. So I just wanted to point that out. So
I'll double click on that for you. So basically I met this monk while I was in Cambodia, and he was like, come out and visit my village. I'm like, sure, why not? That sounds like a great opportunity. Gonna go get a community day in the countryside, and there's this well-beaten tourist path for backpackers throughout Southeast Asia. And so I felt like, what do I have to lose? I'm a backpacker. I'm 23 years old. What can I do? I'm gonna go out and see this guy's village and see what it's like. And then when I got there, they brought me this little pagoda, put me in this pagoda, sat me down in a bamboo mat. There was a friend that was there with me at the time. And they basically, one by one, there was common council, village elders, hundreds of people there. And one by one, they got up and said, thank you for coming. We've been waiting for you. We have this project and it's a reservoir. Thank you for agreeing to help us rebuild this reservoir. And I was like,
when
sorry,
did
what?
I sign up for this?
yeah.
You're like, exactly. I didn't read the fine print. You're gonna have to go back.
Right. I signed a contract somewhere along the way. No, it was quite a shock. These monks, I felt like, instant skepticism rising in my chest, and like, okay, cool. Like what? Like, first of all, I'm a backpacker. I have no funds. I'm no trust fund. I'm barely going to finish my backpacking trip with my bank account balance above zero. And I'm not an engineer. I don't have an engineering background. But these monks were very persistent. They're like, no, you're going to help us do this. And I'm like, I don't think so. But like, hang on, pause. Like, I will at least I can be an advocate on your behalf. And they brought us around to this reservoir, and this reservoir was huge. Like it was basically a dry, sad rice field at the time, but it was quite large. It was about half a kilometer to a side.
Wow.
So it's not like a little kind of like pond, like drinking pond. It was actually like quite a large
like
structure.
You're thinking in your head one of those cute little water wheel ones where there's like a little creek and then you
totally
get this giant reservoir.
No, it was not like that at all. It was very, very, very big. Would have been, I think, had I known it beforehand, would have been a pretty large project for any kind of local municipality even. So it was way outside of the scope of what one person or even one small group of people would be able to accomplish, I think. And their money, what they were scoping was $15,000 to do this thing. And like maybe 2 months of work and $15,000, and we could do it. It ended up being $250,000 just for the structure of the Watergate itself. And it ended up, I ended up living in Cambodia for almost 7 years. So working on this project. In that process, like the connective tissue that brought me there was this kind of fascinating escalation of commitment in which, I think I realized very quickly after I sent that email to my friends saying basically like, hey, look, there's these monks. I met these monks. They have a real project. 6,000 people in their community are looking for help with their irrigation system. We can do it. I think it's possible to do it, but I'm not gonna be the person to do it, but I think they just need like $15,000. That's like a car, right? Like that's like a cheap car. And like that's like not an insane amount of money. Yeah, exactly. Right. so it felt like a reasonable ask, amongst like kind of my extended community to do this thing. And what came from that email, and it went, I sent out these missives regularly to friends and family, and this one particular email was part of it went to this kind of group, what we today maybe call a group text or a Facebook
was
group.
this like an RSS feed? I read about it in the book, and I was like, I didn't really know what it was, and I'm not the most tech savvy guy, so it's just like, I'm sure other people will understand this, so I'll just go with it.
So it was a bespoke social network. It was so a bunch of my friends in California, where I grew up, we went to a bunch of like kind of underground music events pretty regularly back in the day, and so it was a collective of people that like to go to these music events, and there was it was like a pretty tight knit community of people that were purveyors of kind of electronic music back in the early 2000s, and so a couple of my friends in this community were developers, and they had built this site, which literally, if you look at it today, you'd be like, oh no, that's basic Facebook, that's basic Twitter. Had profile pictures, that had profile information. Everyone was linked up in this common thread of nodes, one-to-one connections, and the community was about 250 people. And if you're familiar with Dunbar, do you know who Robin Dunbar
number
is? Yeah, exactly.
It's 150, isn't it?
Yeah, it's between 150 and 250 roughly. It's like depending on what range you're talking in.
Let's just give that a quick explanation. Sorry, I don't want to interrupt.
Yeah.
I just like a lot of I don't want to be like, oh, Dunbar's number, and then people who are the equivalent of me with the tech stuff who don't know what Dunbar's number is.
Get outraged on the internet and post something in your comments, and totally. So Robin Dunbar, he's an anthropologist who studied the cranial size of primates and correlated that directly with group size, so average group size. So basically, our brains have a limited volume. You can think about it, our brains have a limited volume for maintaining close relationships, right? And these things scale down to, we have like five slots for close relationships in our lives, for very, very extremely close relationships in our lives, and that scales up 5 to 50 to 100, 150 to 200. And there's a bit of a sliding scale there depending on the group and the context, but we really can the optimal kind of group size for maintaining close social connections in a larger group is between 150 and 250. And you can't, if you go above that, you just start forgetting people. You start forgetting people's names. It's hard for our brains to actually kind of maintain that connection. So Robin Dunbar did this famous study on this back in the day, and it actually was a study that kind of launched 1,000 startups in Silicon Valley. And you can see across the social graph of social media, you can see these clusters of around that, like 150, 250 people. Malcolm Gladwell talked about in the tipping point back in the day as being this kind of like key number for organizations that were trying to maintain cohesion within smaller groups, because you can't have 50,000 people and just like open flat communication. You need to have these smaller groups. Also, it correlates with certain military hierarchies too. So if you have I think it's so a platoon is 50, I believe, right? Anyway, I'm going to get this wrong, but it does actually correspond pretty well and to military sizes for optimal group size. So anyway, so this group of my friends was like between 200 and 250 people, but they were all people that were very passionate about staying connected. And this one particular project, this email hit them, and it was like in some way kind of an emotional plea. I was like pretty touched by the monks' desire to do something for their community. Cambodia suffered through what was truly one of the most horrific things that has happened in the last century, in terms of like per capita loss of life. I think it overtakes World War II in terms of conflict.
Like I think if anybody wants to get bummed out, go watch that. What was that movie? The Bridge over the River Kwai, or The Killing Fields?
The Killing Fields.
Watch that movie. Whew. It's a tough one.
That's a tough one, definitely.
You'll watch that and you'll be like, oh, I want to give money to these monks to build a dam too, even though it's already built. Totally. I just want to send them money.
Absolutely. So that was an emotional plea, and it went out, and I felt very strongly for these monks, like this guy, one of these monks, lost most of his family during the violence. And it was a strange sort of thing that happened in Cambodia. It wasn't like one it wasn't two countries fighting. It was related to the Vietnam War for one. So that conflicts tend to spread. Conflict in one place will go to another country, oftentimes like Iraq, Syria, that kind of thing. But so that you can think about Vietnam, Cambodia as being our parents' generation's Iraq, Syria, right? That was like literally, I think, the way they thought about it. It was this conflict that a lot of people served in, and that had these just horrific implications for decades to come after that. So Cambodia was in a civil war. It was this kind of auto genocide in which there was this this super extreme what you might call like call out culture, in which people were extremely culturally indoctrinated. Kids were forced to be the executors, literally, like they would actually be forced to kill people, like child soldier style. It was really dark. It was really dark, and it was dark for a long time. It was dark. So the Khmer Rouge, which was the rebel group that took control of the country, they were in power for only about 5 years, but they decimated the country. They defrocked and country. They just did a lot of really messed up stuff, and it was this really extreme form of communism. So without getting too deep into that, but it was very dark, and it was dark up until even the 90s. People were still getting like killed and kidnapped, and they were still fighting what was happening there. So this community needed that help, and they were looking to a random, dirty backpacker like me to somehow help them. And who knows what they saw in me, but like I would argue, that what they did see was that I was ostensibly connected, right? I was connected to a wider world of people that even if I didn't have any money, I had this wealth of connection to other people,
kind of like a lifeline to the world almost.
Yeah, totally. And that's kind of what it feels like when you walk. I mean, if you spent much time in the developing country, when you really start to go off the beaten path, you start to realize kind of our interconnection to the wealth that our connection provides. Like just the fact that we are connected by a thread to the broader economy, the broader like information network that we share. All of these things are tremendous reservoirs of wealth for us. And also, as we're learning, they're also tremendous liabilities, I think, for a lot of reasons. But yeah, so I was able to engender a huge amount of support. I all of a sudden had this, I sent this email out. All of a sudden, I had this kind of cascade of support coming in from friends. People like, "This is amazing. How can I help?" And that was great. It was amazing. It was cool. All of a sudden, I'm like, okay, maybe I can actually do this. Maybe this is something I can do. Maybe I am that guy, possibly, right? Like if I can send an email and get 50 people to like express tremendous interest and support, then maybe I'm that guy.
If I was you, I would have been so beyond arrogant at that point, being like, I did this. This is all thanks to me. I'm pretty much the king of the world right now. So I like that you're like, maybe I can be that guy. Where I would have been like, yeah, let's do more. Let's do this.
The damn
Right. So at the end, I will just say, like, through this kind of process of escalation of commitment and this like extremely frustrating project, which again I thought would take 2 months and ended up taking almost 7 years. It was like a very intense experience. I started an organization around this project. I was really interested in helping people connect to various projects like this in the future. Like I could see that there was this like possibility to connect people online towards compassionate causes, and I thought that was like such an incredible thing. The project itself, like, it was completed. We built this reservoir. There's now a big old reservoir in Cambodia called Trout Cod Reservoir that myself and a bunch of other people helped build. And the reason I don't feel like comfortable in taking the prow of the ship kind of I did this moment on it is because it really was a volunteer effort. And like when you activate a community like that, we brought in some incredible volunteers to work on it. I had a bunch of engineers come out from this group called Engineers Without Borders. That was incredible. So it was really this collective effort to work on this project. We found landmines. That was a big problem. We had to demine this entire area. So damn is right.
Yeah.
Forgive that joke. It's been embedded in my brain from working on a dam for so many years. But yeah, so anyways, this kind of connective process of this connective power of the internet was something that I was really deeply fascinated with. And so when I finished the project, I moved back to the Bay Area where I grew up. And I connected with all these designers and developers who were also very interested in this same process of basically getting people connected online for the purposes of compassionate action, for the purposes of getting people kind of riled up about causes, about like ending poverty, about bringing war criminals to justice, about about solving hunger. All of these things which seemed very like no brainers for us. It was like, duh, like we can solve these problems now. We have the internet. You can see the problems. You have the internet, you can see the problems, so we can solve them. Like people have just not been aware of them in the past. And so this cohort that I was a part of was pretty much at the advancing edge of this very strange new trend of kind of activating people online. And I don't know if you remember this video called Coney 2012.
Oh, I remember.
Oh, do I ever? Yeah.
Nice, great.
We we have a mutual friend who was like Coney 2012 guy, and he like wouldn't stop talking about it for like a year, and we're like, okay.
Yeah. So Coney 2012 was like that was my extended network. There was a bunch of my friends that did that, and that was the most viral piece of content in history up until that point. Like truly, it was the most viral thing that had ever been created by a human. And I think it still is the most viral piece of content above a certain time frame. It's above a certain length. It's a 23-minute video, I think, and it's has over 100 million views. So quite a strange and wild thing. Also, I think a fantastic representation of just what the internet does when something goes super viral. It huge interest, tremendous support, and then exploded in this kind of this shower of conspiracy and scorn around what was actually happening. Were these guys actually doing the thing? And it really was kind of like the first viral moment in which we saw the continuum of what we were going to see in the decades after with every single major kind of motivational kind of emotional thing that happens on the internet, which is it's like a big coordination problem, right? You see everyone gets excited about something, and there's huge collective action, and this happens with a news item, any major conflict that you see in the world these days, right? It's like people are really excited, like Ukraine, it doesn't really matter what it is, but there's this tremendous kind of COVID was a great example of this. Everyone's like, oh, we need to come together and solve this problem. This is really important. And then through this kind of life cycle, it explodes into this online conspiracy and scorn, and people aren't sure what to think because there's not a good resolution mechanism, right? There's not like the system continues to spin after the viral moment, and there's not a system for it to resolve. Like we don't get one narrative, we get 50 at the end of it. So anyway, so long story short, I've been sitting with this kind of strange superpower of virality and trying to understand it for quite a long time. And I started writing about this stuff in the lead up to the 2016 election. I could really tell this was starting to go off the rails around then. And I wrote a couple of viral articles that, viral articles about, again, virality, that I think they struck a chord on trying to kind of identify this issue that we were starting to tingle with at that point in time. And since then, the book has been my kind of full-time project for a number of years now. So this has been I've been really trying to get something down that is well researched, interesting, approachable, and that is helpful to the current kind of insanity of our culture and internet.
It must have been. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Derek.
Oh, thanks, Dale. I would definitely say that you've like I feel like this book is almost, and I'm not just kissing your ass because you're on our podcast, but like it's almost
you're kissing his ass.
it feels like something indispensable that people should read just to gain a better understanding of like the mechanisms that are being used to elicit reactions from them, because maybe it's just the circles I travel in, but I feel like I cannot log on. Do people still say that? I can't go on the internet these days without seeing any discussion devolve into a like shouting match over conflicting points of view, or like things being used to generate controversy or generate conflict. And we have all these issues that that at one point it felt like we had moved past. Gay rights as an example, right? And all of a sudden now we're seeing, you know, people are emboldened to burn pride flags again, and we're having all these controversies over the LGBTQ community. And the story you told about the Cambodian dam harkened back to a time when like that was the promise of the internet, right? We could harness the collective good of people and like channel it towards action. So how did we get from there to where we are now?
Yeah, great. I mean, yeah, great placement, I think, in space and time here. Yeah. So it turns out that the internet does some very strange things to our brains. Specifically, social media does some very strange things to our brains. And there was 3 features that were rolled out at social media companies between the years 2009 and 2012 that I believe fundamentally are like kind of the core engine of the spin out. And the internet is this, you know, is such a wide ranging, machine with so many different pieces in it. So it's kind of difficult to focus in on just one or 2 specific features. But I do think that if you look at how things changed, how our emotional attention began to be so fragmented, and how emotions themselves began to become so contagious online, you can look at these 3 specific features that were rolled out with little fanfare at social media companies starting in 2009. Those features are the algorithmic feed, so the rank ordering of content that is not reverse chronological, but it's ordered by engagement by an algorithm, which we're all familiar with, I think, today, right? Most people know that their feeds don't come chronologically anymore. Social metrics, so that's the visibility of metrics like likes, comments, shares, just that visibility, the visible number next to the content that we share, which is this very strange dynamic, which makes you want more of it, and which is a huge status symbol. And then the final feature is the one-click share, the instant share. So the single button that you press to pass it to your entire network. So each one of those features on their own, they made a lot of sense for developers to deploy, and they also made a lot of sense for users, because users like them, right? For algorithmic feeds, I really like the idea of not having to scroll down through all the noise to see the one important post that my friend did while I was offline 5 hours ago, right? We want some ranking around that. It makes sense for me as a user. And for developers, it made sense because they could keep people on site longer and keep people scrolling longer, right? The social metrics, also one of these things where it's like just the like button. I mean, it's crazy to think that this actually, like, this was a thing that was invented, right? It's like a button that was invented that is now such a part of our kind of ecosystem and engagement online. It's just a wild thing to think, oh no, that button actually literally did not exist. It didn't exist 15 years ago. There was not this button to press to like something online. That did not exist. But the original intentionality of that was, it was created by Justin Rosenstein and others, which was to give more positivity to the world. This is his quote on it.
It's hilarious that they intended for the like button to be a positive thing and just like have this mass outpouring of positive like emotions to everybody, and it just did the exact opposite.
Yeah. I mean, and look, for a while, and just to give some credit to the the poor souls who have spent so much time designing these tools and now racking their brains and their hearts about what is done to society. For a while even after it was deployed, for years after it was deployed, I think there was nothing but positivity associated with these things, insofar as like people really liked it. No pun intended. People really enjoyed using these tools, and it's like a great signal. Like, a like is cheap for me to give to you, but it means a lot when you receive a like, right? It's like oh, that person that I care about they liked me. They liked something I did, you know, and it's very inexpensive, and it you just looking on the surface, it would seem to be some, you know, some basic it would seem to have some kind of fundamental positivity to it. So I want to put a like a little bit of a you know, try not to look back on it with such you know, extreme you know, 20 hindsight 2020 vision on the stuff, but so something strange happens. Just say like just for in terms of social metrics, something strange happens when you are in one of these systems, when you're in a system, when you're in an engagement system like this, when someone is liking your content, you're posting content, and then someone is liking that content or not liking that content. What that actually does is it starts to train our brains to be. So there's this psychologist named B.F. Skinner. Have you guys maybe heard of him at some point in time? He made this thing called a Skinner box, what he called a operant conditioning chamber, in which he would put animals into it. He put like a pigeon into it, a rat into it, and flash a light, and there would be a button to press. And if the animal pressed the button, then they would get a food pellet. But they wouldn't get a food pellet consistently. They would actually get a food pellet at random intervals. And they found that the random intervals of getting the actual reward, if it was consistent reward, the animal got bored and would walk away. But if it's consistent reward, then the animal went a little crazy. It goes a little bit nuts because it gets addicted to the process of pressing the button. So it'll start pressing the button faster. And it'll like try to keep pressing the button to try to figure out the pattern of what is coming, what is going on behind the machine, right? So that's actually what we created with social metrics inadvertently. We created a Skinner box, which is this addictive machine. So there's another industry that figured this out a long time ago. It's a gambling industry, slot machines. Is fundamentally the same exact mechanism. You'll see this mechanism in a lot of online games, a lot of games in general, which is like you'll you know, the idea of farming in these games. It's like you're not sure what you're going to get if you like go out and you know, like in Zelda when you're hacking the bushes and seeing what you're going to get, or opening a chest, you're not sure what you're going to get. Loot crates, the same thing. It's the same dynamic that is deeply addictive to our brains. And so they stumbled upon this with the like button with social metrics, and it also is deeply interrelated to our desire for social status. So that's a big portion of it as well. And then finally, the one-click share. That is what allowed for all of our content to go instantaneously viral. And there's something really weird that happens when we click share on something, when we emotionally respond to something and we instantly click share. Usually the type of content that we share fast is stuff that tends to be inaccurate, emotional, outrageous. It tends to lacking context. It's the kind of content that is much more oriented to what Daniel Kahneman calls system one thinking. It's like the kind of really fast thinking heuristics, where it's just like very emotional, versus slow thinking, which is more reflective and deliberative and stuff. So the one-click share has basically made this impulsive, emotional content spread far faster and more widely than ever before. And so those three features together, I think fundamentally transitioned us from this kind of more like static, like, oh, I'm going to go on the internet and see what's going on today, to like, I just got this notification, I'm going to send this out to my friends. And it's just changed the entire tenor and relationship that we've had with this tool set.
Yeah, it's almost like it went from like, oh, let's go see what's going on, to did you see this shit?
Exactly. No, exactly. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Yeah.
It's funny, when you're saying like how people share stuff that's inaccurate and stuff, it's like I always feel like social media is like if Weekly World News would have won the newspaper wars, because it's like this like Bat Boy and stuff. Like my grandma always got those magazines, our newspapers, and we were like, does she think this is real? And we could never actually tell. And like on social media, a lot of the time you're like, do people think this is real, or do they like, are they in on the joke and get that it's like satire type of thing? So it's like sometimes when people are sharing stuff that's obviously not true, you're like, what is it? Do they know? Yeah, so it's just like weird questioning thing.
Yeah, I mean, and you're bringing up, I think, a really important point, which is that the dynamics of social media are not actually like, while the infrastructure and connective capacity of it and the way the scale is fundamentally different. The actual dynamics are really not they're not new insofar as like we've been dealing with a lot of these same issues for a long time, since the beginning of the penny press back in the early 1800s. And I go into a pretty like a portion of the book and talk about like how we went from this kind of salacious, gossipy, fake news world of penny papers back, almost 200 years ago, and turned it into this like kind of organ of journalism, which is really important. So, and like that we historically trust. And yeah, so we've definitely been dealing with these issues for a long time, in other degrees. So, and you're absolutely right. It's like basically the algorithm is, it's weekly world news algorithm. That's what we're running with right now. So you're right on that. Yeah, agreed. Yeah.
I listened to other podcast you're on back in May 26 last year, Metamuse, and on there you said you got to treat your algorithm like a dog. Do you want to kind of expand on that a bit? It's a good point.
Yeah. So, and this may be a short-lived point, because AI is quickly becoming extremely smart to a degree that our algorithms, I think, are achieving above dog level of intelligence pretty quickly. But yeah, so a recommendation algorithm is working with rules, and it's working with particular weights, and it's like you think about a recommendation algorithm like a dog, which is like it's bringing you things, it's playing fetch with you on a regular basis, going out and bringing you things that it thinks you want on a regular basis, right? And it has a set of defaults based on what it can see. And this dog it's a weird kind of autistic dog, right? It doesn't know, it can't really read human, it can't read things about you that you really like deeply want. It's only looking at kind of the signals of your behavior and the bullet point items about your personality and who you are, right? So it's really a strange, it's like also kind of immune to shame, right? And is immune to
of course it is. It is the internet.
So you can't really scold it in the same way that you would maybe a dog, and the dog would like rethink its whole relationship with life. The algorithm is but it is actually tracking your preferences. And so what I do with YouTube on a regular basis, and like this is actually a fun thing if you try it with YouTube. So we tend to think that we all have kind of different YouTubes. We have like different algorithm. We know we have different TikToks. We know we have different kind of Facebook feeds. But if you go to I like to do this depending on where I am, the location of where I am, because you can actually find really interesting things about what the algorithm thinks about your zip code. Because so if you open up a private browser, and then you log into YouTube, and you'll see the kind of stuff it serves you. It's trying to figure out who you are based on the limited parameters it can see of you, because it has this very limited view into it has like, it can basically see your location ish, but not even, it can't see like your specific location, can see your location ish. So it tends to show really dumb videos because it's trying to reach the widest possible audience.
Okay, like lowest common denominator type of deal.
Yeah, exactly. Lowest common denominator, exactly, for the audience range. So it's a fun thing to kind of just open up a browser and see what it's doing, and then it's trying to read you from that point based on the what you click, and instantly from that point. And most of us have a pretty robust relationship with these algorithms at this point in time, because we've been using them for such a long time, and they really know, they have a huge amount of data about us. But they also get caught in these what you can call kind of local minima, which is this like the lowest common denominator of something that you'll click on, but you didn't really want to click on it, right? It's not speaking to the things that you really want in the world. It's actually just it's like I don't want to be the person that clicks on this, but like I did. I was tired and I was hungry, and I clicked on it, and I watched that those 4 Avengers clips or something like that. Now I was just going to keep on sharing those Avengers clips with you, being like, this person likes the Avengers, so we're going to, every day when you wake up, we're going to give you these Avengers clips. And so that's like, you can kind of think about it like that. So what you can do, you can actually train it into like most of these algorithms, and TikTok is actually a bit more sophisticated than this, unfortunately. And I say unfortunately because it's starting to kind of reach that point of of velocity. It's like the algorithm of TikTok is so good. It's so good that it can just read the microscopic slowdown of your vision as
Oh,
you're scrolling.
yeah.
The micro of your scrolling as you're going through a particular top
Mhm.
video, and be like, oh, okay, cool. We know that this person likes thirst traps, even though they didn't say they didn't want thirst trap, but they're
Yeah.
gonna respond. They're gonna keep watching if they give them the thirst trap. But things like Facebook and YouTube at this point in time, at least, and these things are constantly changing, but at this point in time have a ... A lot of them next, or like a button next to the content that's showing you. You can click it and it'll say, show me less of this, or I'm not interested.
Okay.
And you can actually aggressively, I do this all the time. It's obviously pruning my algorithm, or like
Mhm.
booping my algorithm on the nose with the newspaper, saying like,
Yeah.
nope, like go on, get me the useful stuff. I don't want this. And I have to do it like, once every 2 weeks. And it actually starts giving me the kind of content that is more valuable to my life. And like YouTube, I think, is one of these, if you look at these regret matrices that they have about social media, and regret is a really important emotion when it comes to our use of social media. If you look at these regret matrices, YouTube is one of these places that we actually have kind of the least regret about. Weirdly,
Yeah.
it's just on the cusp, but it's like almost like just a majority of people say they don't regret their time on YouTube. So
Yeah.
and there is tremendous value and tremendous usefulness, utility out of it. I feel like sometimes I'm like working on a project around the house, and I'll be like, I feel like it's the Matrix moment where Neo's like, I need to learn how to fly a helicopter, and you like go on YouTube. It's just like a slowed down version of that, right?
Oh,
Where
yeah.
you're like, I need to figure out how to like do a concrete drill into a ceiling and hang something or other, and like and you're out for a few minutes,
Watch a
and then
20-minute video. Yeah,
exactly, 20-minute video, and then you got it. So
it's
so
funny.
yeah.
I had this exact conversation with I have a 9-year-old son the other day, and I was talking with him about the things he watches on YouTube, and I was trying to explain to him that there's an entire world, like anything he could possibly want to know or learn about, there's a video for it on YouTube. And he looked confused. He's like, I've never seen any of that on YouTube. And I had to be like, well, here is why, because it's based on everything you've interacted with in the past, right?
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So
Well,
I do think
yeah.
it's good to use these as tools and not as TV, right? And that's like a little bit of
That's a very
like, you
good
want
point.
to push it toward tool and away from
Mhm.
TV, because they kind of have their own agenda, and they will pull us in really strange directions for sure.
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
find a lot of times I have to, instead of just picking, like on YouTube specifically, like your son, he's probably picking videos that are like the one that he already watched. Whereas I find after I search some specific things I want to look at, like the pyramids or something, then I'll get more pyramids. So it's like you were saying, like pruning, one way to add, like pruning things off of your algorithm. One The best way to add stuff into it is just search stuff that you actually like, and then that'll like get in there. And I don't, it probably gets ranked higher, right? Because it's stuff you specifically searched for.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, it's
Hmm.
looking for stuff you search for, but that's generally a less powerful signal than things that you watched for long periods of
what you've
time.
actually
So
engaged with.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, so yeah, that having the function of actual like hard pruning is really important there,
hmm,
because again, like these like another helpful analogy is like it's a little bit like yeah a face, like do you guys watch Aliens, like those face huggers?
Yeah.
yeah,
They're like,
yeah,
yeah, like some of these algorithms, especially when you're tired, they just like whoop, right, they're like on your
yeah.
face, and you can't get off when you're exhausted. Like for me specifically, and I have adult diagnosed ADHD, probably like a
Hmm.
lot of people who have interacted with the internet and grown up with the internet. And when I'm in low agency mode, when I'm tired or hungry, it's like,
Hmm.
no, it beats me, and like, so it actually like it takes me like 30 minutes to 3 hours longer to get off of these apps and these tools than
Hmm.
than it would otherwise. So it's important to recognize, to try to prune them aggressively, so you're less likely to fall into those traps.
It's a very good point.
So I feel like the trajectory we're on right now, like we just look at how the influence that the kind of the shifting uh general mood of the internet and social media has kind of driven us towards. Like we've seen it have a not overall great impact on democracy and elections in multiple countries. I think, like I alluded to before, we're seeing it have kind of a negative impact on social issues, and roll back the clock on those things. Do you foresee this trend continuing? And to that effect, what can people do as individuals? There's a lot of talk around media literacy, but maybe just like digital literacy. Like I think having a better understanding of why we're seeing the things we're seeing. What do you think people can do to kind of like stop this trend in its tracks, and maybe bring us back to the good old days of the internet where we could collectively get awesome shit done together?
Yeah. Yeah. Great question. Yeah. So to kind of project out into the future a little bit, I mean, I don't see, you have these kind of three buckets of solutions to what we're facing right now. I don't think the internet, I don't think social media specifically is going away. I think these tools are increasingly powerful and increasingly influential in our life and our politics. I do think that we can, and like this whole stuff with Elon recently is pretty wild, right? The fact that
which stuff?
yeah, right, exactly. No, exactly, truly, right? Yeah, no, it's hard to even keep up. But Twitter, which was this kind of go-to place for journalists, has now been exploded into Mastodon, Blue Sky. There's like 1,000 different Post.news, 1,000 different attempts at taking some of that market share and becoming the go-to location for kind of sharing information. So I just to speak about what we can do as individuals. So I think spending less time on social media, definitely important, right? I can guarantee that you spend too much time on social media, and it doesn't matter who you are, but you probably spend too much time on social media. And I mentioned regret before. I think regret is a really important emotion to recognize when you are trying to figure out and kind of calibrate how much time you're spending on these tools, right? It's like, try turning it off for a week and coming back to it. And when you come back to it, see how you feel after just being off it for a week. See what the kind of emotion that shows up in your body is, because it's likely going to be like calm, peace. It's going to be something that you're like, this is, actually, I have more time to do the things that I wanted to do, right? So in general, these kind of simple things of just trying to retract yourself a little bit from the outrage machine, I think is really important. Also, I just think that people don't recognize how much news plays a part in this, because news gets news from Twitter, and journalists are obsessed with Twitter, even though there's this crazy fragmentation that's happening right now. Journalists get the context and the hot take and the editorialization, the editorial angle. They figure out who is mad about what by using social media. And so if you're tracking, especially some of these kind of more partisan news outlets, and even some traditional news outlets have become more partisan in recent years. If you're tracking and obsessed with the news and you're a news junkie, and like I've struggled with that myself, like I obsessively check the news sometimes through certain durations of global events, you're still plugged into the machine, like you're still a part of the system. So I think having a limited diet of news is also really important. Like if it's one radio show a day, or like one chunk of time that you're actually consuming news, is also like spend a half an hour on it in the evening or in the morning or whatever it is, but just don't get too sucked into it. I think that's really, really important. Because it's the same system.
Like what you're saying, like how like social media used to just be like the news would show up in social media, but now it's like almost like social media is showing up in the news, where it's like you'll read like clickbait articles and it'll be like, this guy said this thing on Twitter, and you're like, that's the whole article? Or was he just had one tweet?
Yeah, no,
or
totally.
like stuff like
100%.
that.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's really hard because it's actually one of the reasons why it's such a wicked problem. Is like if you are asymmetrically, if people are asymmetrically outraged, then they're going to do things that are asymmetrically bad, right? So it's like half the population is off Twitter, but half the population is on Twitter, and they're extra angry about stuff, and they're being exposed to inordinate threats and they're being, they're seeing constant threats to identity. They're a group they care about is being threatened, and there's hate speech, and there's all these issues related to them. So if there's asymmetrical outcomes, half the population is outraged, half of it's not, then that half is going to take action and kind of throw things out of balance and whack for the other half that is not outraged about it. So this is like one of these problems about it, is like this. If we live in a society together, we have desires to make the world better collectively in our communities, and outrages are really important for that, right? Like we need to agree upon the broken things in order to fix them. And if we can't agree upon the broken things, then we might fix the wrong thing and break something else in the process. Or number two, and this is like part of the democratic process, just in its fundamental nature, we take outrages and we turn them into policy. We vote on people that actually try to solve those problems, and there's this kind of virtuous cycle of fixing things that are broken. And that's something that the internet in its current form with social media has really thrown out of whack. It's thrown out of balance in a pretty big way. So yeah. I got more, but
Sorry, did I derail your 3 buckets analogy? Okay.
Oh yeah. So
because I kind of butted in there. So
it's all good.
Anybody who's waiting for the 3rd bucket, I don't want to
So things individuals can do, things that the platforms can do, and the things that governments can do. And the things that platforms can do, I think that focusing on content moderation has been a mistake more than anything else. I think that the types of content related issues that come up when you have super intense like fleets of content moderators out there that are responsible for basically kind of arbitrarily determining what is hate speech and what's not hate speech, and kind of and not to say it's not an important job. It's a super important job, especially like with there's a whole lot of toxic stuff on the internet. And these are you guys familiar with the tragedy of the commons? Have you heard that before?
No.
Again, so basically it's like,
I mean, yes, I know, but explain it to anybody who doesn't.
Of course, yeah. So basically, if you have a common field that is available to everyone to graze their cattle in, right? It's owned by the community writ large, the public, right, writ large. Then there's no incentive without. There's basically the field will be overgrazed, right? The field will be overgrazed, and it will become a shithole and a dust bowl, and people won't be able to graze their cattle on it because it will be overgrazed by everyone in the community. This is a classic problem in economics called the tragedy of the commons. Social media is our commons now, right? It's like it's basically a collective asset, right? That we all, as a collective, wealth of this network that we have, that is full of people doing bad things. And it does require it requires certain individuals and algorithms, and it requires like a sewage system to get the shit out of it, right? Then I'm mixing metaphors here a little bit. It's like a city, but the sewage system. But it does requires people to help police it and help make it a better place. But in general, I think you can tilt the entirety of the system towards better content creation by and there's a bunch of ways of doing this. So the one-click share was an example of like, oh, cool, I'm angry about something, I'm going to share it onto all of my friends. Like instantaneously, everyone's angry about something. It might not actually be a real thing, but everyone's angry about it instantly, right? Or it might be something that's missing context. It might be something that's out of proportion. It might be cherry-picked, but instantly everyone's angry about it. If you remove that, or if you limit the number of people you can share with, or if you give people a cooldown period before they can actually share, then that can dramatically improve the quality of the content that transits in the system, right? So focusing on these frictions, these like useful frictions to help slow things down. And so like this was an intervention that I wrote about that was subsequently adopted in a couple of different places, different social media companies. But like if you're about to type something that includes like super nasty words, don't, like, the algorithm's not going to censor you, but like maybe it gives you pause and says, hey, like sounds like you might be a little angry. Like
like on Facebook, if you use
like
this
thing's going to post,
like, do you want to post this?
Right. No, literally that. Exactly. It's like, do you want to post it? And it can post it, and you can still post it, but it's like, it's asking your better self, right? To take a minute and be like, is this going to really improve
just
things?
To reflect a little bit. Yeah,
exactly. And that goes a really long way. I think actually, when you think about the scale of interventions like this, they can dramatically decrease these kind of these moments of emotional contagion and outbursts and things that are really really harmful to us
What's the
collectively.
program that doesn't let you share to more than 5 people? Was that WhatsApp
WhatsApp,
that did
yeah,
that? Okay. Yeah, so
yeah.
that's
That
like an
was
example of that where it's like you can't share the same link with more than 5 people at once or something?
right. Five, yeah,
Yeah.
I think it was five people or five groups. I'm forgetting what it was, but it used to be up. You could just infinitely share to any number of people and any number of
Mhm.
groups, and they throttled that because of the violence in Myanmar.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
that's
yeah. So I mean, it goes to show it's like, and this
Mhm.
is something I just want to like maybe double click on this point real fast when we're just like really just make this
Yeah.
point. It's like we tend to think in a free society like the kind of Western world that we live in, we tend to think about freedom of speech as being this really critical and important thing, and it really is. But misinformation and disinformation are actually like super toxic, and we don't tend to think about we don't tend to see how problematic those things are. But like if you look at the history of some of the
Mhm.
worst things that have happened in our species, like some of the worst injustices, some of the worst kind of ethnic slaughters and pogroms and terrible things that have happened, huge portion of them come from misinformation. A huge portion, like rumors of Jews poisoning wells, right, that like
Mhm.
led to like horrible stuff that comes from misinformation. And I think that's just really important to note that and like it breaks kind of and it's okay to have a certain baseline of it. Like we have to have a
Yeah.
certain baseline of it because you don't want any kind of authoritarian system telling us what we what we can and can't say ever. You don't
Yeah.
want that. But when rumors take a life of their own and they become fact, and then or they become conspiracies and then fact, and then I say quote unquote fact, and people start believing them, then like there's a whole problem. It really does backslide us democratically and I think ethically in the world
Mhm.
when there's too much and misinformation. So I say that with like a big kind of nod to the free speech folks who believe that we just need to have zero restrictions on speech whatsoever. But we do require there needs to be a baseline of kind of shared facts in order to
Yeah.
cohabitate and coordinate above a certain level, right? And I think that's one of the things we're
Yeah.
seeing right now is that like the national level is really struggling,
Mhm.
and we're kind of collapsing down to these more like state level and city level coordination mechanisms because it's getting harder to share narratives and share facts.
Yeah, it's
So
almost hit a
anyway,
point
so yeah, go
where
ahead.
like truth is completely subjective now, right? Like depending on who you're
Yeah,
talking to, or facts. Even we saw there used to be these mechanisms for just fact checking on the internet, like Snopes or
right.
whatever. And I think during COVID there were people debunking Snopes to the point where I think like those things lost legitimacy in the eyes of a
Yeah,
lot of people. And now you're just like, okay, where do I turn to
Yeah.
yeah,
because I think the other thing is that people are inherently, I don't want to say lazy, but they want an answer quickly, right? Like they're not willing to wade in and do the research on every single thing that's coming across their news feed or coming across their Twitter timeline to establish whether it is like true before they react to it, right?
right.
So what do you think, like what are some of the things we can do at the personal or tech level to
Yeah,
clamp down on
reduce that.
misinformation? Yeah.
Yeah. So some personal heuristics that I think are helpful is just recognizing that like if there is something that you see on the internet that makes you extremely angry, that makes you want to share it immediately, like just wait. Just like just
Yeah.
wait a little while because you're gonna find out the reality of it. Like there's a saying in journalism, so everyone's trying to be first in journalism, right? Like everyone's trying to
Mhm.
get the scoop, everyone's trying to get the story, but there's a saying in journalism that you're not first if you're wrong, right? You're not
Ah,
you're
that's
you're
good.
actually
Yeah.
you're not getting the scoop if you actually scoop the wrong thing, if you actually
Mhm.
said the wrong thing. And yeah, so I think it's really important to just take a breath, and just assume like it's not your job to share on this information with the world until, like, until it's completely corroborated, which, like, can be hard for sure, but I think it's like, it's not your job to pass this stuff on necessarily if it's super emotionally arresting, because that's the stuff that tends to be out of context. That's stuff that tends to be untrue, or out of proportion a lot of the time. Yeah, so I think that's a really important piece to it. There's just one, there's something I think that is really important here, which is which you touched on in the beginning when we were talking about, it's like the weekly world news is taking control of our our internet news algorithm. If you blur your eyes, social media companies and newspapers are actually not that different. They're actually, like, very very similar enterprises. That, like if you blur your eyes, it's like, you look at it, it's like social media is, it's a thing that that people go out and they find a story, or they have a thought or an opinion or feeling, and they put it out there, and then an editor or an algorithm, and, like in the case of social media, algorithm, an editor in the case of newspaper, puts it into a feed, which was the newspaper, or in your feed, which is your actual news feed today. And it goes out to people in your community or wider network, right? And that is like, yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, I wanted to touch on, like, I like to compare social media and stuff to print journalism a lot too, because it's like you said before, that print journalism has gone basically like through 200 years of evolution, and it's where we're at. And one thing people don't realize, that if you put something in a newspaper, there's a lot more nanny kind of stuff you have to do. Like, you can't just put an advertisement.
There's fact checking, right?
Yeah.
And libel laws, and
yeah, exactly. And even like advertorials, where you get someone writes an ad based article for a company, like, there's rules, like, you can't have it in the same font as the newspaper, and it has to say advertisement at the top.
Totally.
So it's basically like old people proofing the newspaper so that they don't get tricked by thinking that this advertorial is an advertisement, where the social media doesn't really have that yet. Like, they're getting there, and they're getting certain things. Yeah.
Well,
and Tobias,
I
was gonna say, in the book you referenced the USA Today Sweet Tooth cover, right? Where that line was blurred a little bit in print media as well.
Yeah, because the bottom has fallen out of the traditional news industry, right? It's like that's the scary thing, is that as the internet has taken more, and as social media has won our attention more and more, traditional journalism, and this is why people are, like, kind of throwing up their hands in a big way. Traditional journalism is starting to kind of resemble, tabloid journalism also in its own strange way, which is I want to qualify, like, journalism is different. Like, it is actually fundamentally different, and there are rules that have been put in place. It's like a very creaky institution, but is an institution that has been in place for a long time. You get sources, right? The newsroom and the editorials, the op-eds are very different, right? Like, there's straight news and there's editorial, and those things are actually really fundamentally different. Most people don't know that like, they're actually not even the same room in a newsroom. Like, they're not even the same part of, they're like, you can't have the journalists talking to the editorial people in the same, like, it's not the same kind of body of implementation there. So so journalists in straight news are actually exclusively focused on what happened, right? Corroborating what happened, and verifying it, just making sure it's like, this thing actually happened, this is what happened, this is it, like, this is the thing that happened. And, like, some curation as well, like identifying what stuff is important versus not important. And while the editorial bent is like, this is my opinion about it, this is what is, this is why it matters, this is what makes me angry about it, this is the analysis about it, and those are actually fundamental different things in a newspaper. And we haven't gotten that memo, I think, when it comes to the difference between those things on social media, certainly.
To social media,
yeah, definitely. So I do think, honestly, and just to talk about, to be slightly hopeful for a second here, I think we're starting to see some kind of reflections of this stuff, of verification tools that are starting to come up and crop up in social media. Like, there's there's what used to be called Birdwatch, which is now called Community Notes on Twitter, which is basically a tool that allows for the broader community to add context to tweets that are maybe taken out of context or that are lies, right? That are lies
Mm.
or inaccuracies. And so it's the, I think Community Notes has they've noted Elon before, they noted Biden
Yeah,
before.
100%.
And they're like, this is actually maybe not a completely accurate statement. This is what it really is. And that's what it is. It's like basically a, little paragraph talking about what the reality is of the situation, and that is a mediator that actually acts as a mediator in this critical function of making sure that you're seeing good information. And that's that's a really important piece that's missing from social media's current form.
Mhm.
I'll say this like with maybe one more like analogy, which I think is a little bit helpful, which is like when things meet the internet, they generally get better, right? There used to be this
Yeah.
industry that we had like people that would literally spend their entire lives going around and trying to figure out like a handful of facts about something, right? They would go
Yeah.
out and they would like search down like the name of 5 tropical birds and make sure they knew what those birds look like. And like they would, and then these people would get together and they were employed by a single employer, and this publisher would come back and they put together this thing called an encyclopedia, and people would like go out and buy a single set of encyclopedia one time for their family, and you have this like giant row of books in your house. There was an encyclopedia, and that was where you went for the facts, right? That was like where you went for the information about the world. When encyclopedias met the internet, we got Wikipedia, right? We
Mhm.
got this incredible tool that is like millions of times the size and just as accurate. And studies show it's actually just as accurate as traditional encyclopedia, and it met the internet and became great. It was like amazing. This is an incredible tool for everyone. It's free, also. It's great. Similarly, if you had a question about something that was related to research, historically you had to go to a library and talk to a librarian, do the Dewey Decimal System, and go through this whole process of like trying to find the right book, go to the aisle and like, oh, is it this book? Is it this book? And you get all these books, you go home, you read all of them, you find a thing. When libraries went the internet, ostensibly we got Google, which is like this
Yeah.
important system of cited and verified page ranked information that we can get instantaneous information from right away, which is great, and answer our questions instantly. When newspapers met the internet, we got nothing, right? We got terrible news, right?
Yeah.
But ostensibly, like when social media came along, we're like, oh no, social media is this whole new invention. It's this incredible new thing, right? It's like Mark Zuckerberg invented social media. It's incredible. It's amazing. But what happened was that handoff that happened in that kind of that relay race that, when it's from encyclopedias to Wikipedia, from libraries to Google, from newspapers to social media, didn't happen because the values of newspapers and the rules of verification, of corroboration, of making sure that there's like proper citation in the things that are being spread, that the rules did not transition with the tool. And instead we have this like kind of cacophony of garbage and emotional outrage and just this crazy explosion of disinformation that is such a problem collectively, and we're suffering as a result.
That's funny.
So yeah.
It's like if with libraries, like the way you're talking about it, how it's like the books went onto the internet and stuff. It would be like if you went reverse, it would be like the libraries would be like, you can look at this book, but you have to look at this ad first. So, and then you're like, well, then how did the libraries get funded? And it's like, well, they're government funded. They were like public works. So it's almost like, where do you think there's an area for like maybe a publicly funded social media? Like if the government, like we're in Canada, I don't know if that came up yet. So we have a lot more publicly funded like
Yeah.
media and news and stuff. Like we have CBC and stuff, which I guess would be
Yeah.
the equivalent of your PBS. But is there, do you think, like room for a PBS style social media?
Yeah, I certainly think so. I think there's a space. I think there's space for it. I mean, I will say that like
Mhm.
running social media companies is hard. Building social media is pretty hard. It's like not an easy thing to do well. A lot of
Yeah.
people do it, but it's hard to do it well. That being said, the BBC, CBC, I believe, NPR, I know, is also funded and subsidized by advertising, right?
Yeah, that's
You
true.
still,
Good
I mean,
point.
maybe you can tell me otherwise, but they're still subsidized by these tools, right? So, or by this service. It doesn't, and there are strict rules in place for doing that, but it's still a piece of the puzzle. NPR, I think, just laid off 10% of its workforce a few months back, and because the reason they cited was because their advertising declined. So and if you look at the history of news, advertising has been one of the best kind of, I say best is a qualified best, but like one of the biggest subsidizers of information for us historically. So it just needs good structures and rules in place to make sure that we are not blurring those lines, that you're like not getting the the snake oil along with your morning news, that you're actually, that you're getting something that's verified, and that it's not too creepy. And I think there's a good balance there. There's a possible balance there that I do think the public, I'm very open to publicly funded social media. I think that'd be amazing if we could figure out how to do it.
Okay.
Tobias, this has been fascinating. Like I said, the book is incredible. I would definitely recommend everyone go and pick it up. It is called Outrage Machine, and it releases in July. Is that correct?
July 11th. Yeah.
July 11th. One
That's
last question.
Sorry, that's the same day that the audiobook comes out too, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. So on Audible.
Do you narrate the audiobook?
I narrate selections from it.
Okay.
Nice.
Yeah, I have to say that was I can tell you about the whole process of reading what you have written. It is a whole strange experience to do that and sit in the studio for 12 hours and look at your own words and think, how did I write this?
Going back and trying to make edits on the fly to the
the
audio version.
Yeah, you guys know how to.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you, what do you wish more people were outraged about, or what do you feel is like a righteous thing to be outraged about right now, rather than just reacting to something?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a really, I think it's a great and like deep question in a lot of ways. I just to bring it back to the beginning of this podcast, I was a pretty righteous kid, and I was pretty outraged about stuff a lot when I was younger. I think that this particular struggle that we're facing right now is like the struggle for kind of our minds on the internet, right? Or this kind of our free will to some degree also on the internet. I think this is the most important issue of our time, and I say that because we're about to enter into this new era of kind of confusion as a result of large language models and the ability to totally imitate humans, to deepfake entire scenarios and public events, and it's like things are going to get really weird. And if we don't put a good system of, I think, verification in place, if we don't take some of these same principles that we've learned over the course of the last 100 years and deploy them across our social media, I think that we're going to be in a much more confused, much more undemocratic, much more dangerous, much more threatened, much more much worse place if we don't figure out how to land this plane. So I think this particular issue of disinformation, making sure that our tools are working for us and not against us, is the most important issue of the moment.
Yeah, I think that's the scariest thing of all, is that the creating highly believable disinformation is about to get a whole lot easier. So that's something I think everyone needs to be aware of and looking out for. Tobias, can't thank you enough for taking the time to chat with us today. We appreciate it. Like I said, go pick up the book, share it. If you have friends out there on Facebook or Twitter who are sharing conspiracy theories or getting mad about stuff all the time, make sure you buy them a copy as well.
Does that mean you're buying me a copy?
Yeah, I would if I thought you knew how to read.
Am I the conspiracy friend? Well, you already know I'm not going to read it. I'm just going to listen to it later.
I'll get you the audiobook.
There you go.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Outrage Factory. I have been your co-host, Derek Bolin. You can no longer follow me on Twitter because oh wait, Tobias, do you want to share your social media? Can people connect with you anywhere?
I mean, I'm at Tobias Rose in most places, and if you do follow me, like I post it regularly, but when I do post, I will gently remind you to reduce your time on social media and or give you good tips and tricks for reducing your outrages and the things that are upsetting you online.
There you go. A
Don't worry,
guilt-free
I'll follow
for
you and share all those conspiracy links with you too.
Awesome.
Dale, you want to?
I just wanted to say this has been great, Tobias. I feel like my IQ went up 10 degrees or 10 points. It's not often where you have a guest where you're like, I feel smarter now. And I'm just beaming. I loved it. It was great. Thank you for sharing your insight on all these topics and getting personal with your story about the dam and stuff. And yeah, anytime you want to come back, you're welcome to, and I'll follow you online and then you can see me and then you can like ignore my conspiracy theory links or whatever, but I'll be there.
Thank you. Thanks,
yes.
Paul. This was awesome. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, no problem. So yeah, if you get a link from @SuperDaleBot on Twitter, that's me. @OutrageFactPod is the actual podcast Twitter. We don't tweet too much. It's more of just here's the next episode and stuff. And then yeah, Gmail, you can send us an email, outragefactpod@gmail. If you have any feedback you want to give us, just search us on YouTube, Outrage Factory. If you're listening to this.
Yeah, if you're listening to this and you want to tell us what you thought about the episode, please rate and review. And until next week,
stay angry.